podcast, Scales and Tails, episode 164 today. And unfortunately, it's winter here where I'm currently at where I live. So the podcasts are going to be more constant thing because I won't have time to go fish or go try to fish because winter is setting in. We already have water freezing over, and you guys are listening to this a couple weeks after the fact. So that means winter will be in more of an effect by then when you guys are listening to this. So no need to worry. We're busting out a bunch of episodes this current week while you're listening. And we got the next episode. We have a very special guest on, so you guys will be excited for that. Then we got the magazine we're working on. Actually, today when we're recording this, I've put in a bunch of hours on the magazine, a bunch of hours on some YouTube videos. I'm going to record some bait overviews tomorrow. So we're taking this little Thanksgiving break we have from work, and we're really putting a bunch of work in to kind of set ourselves up for success, to not have to worry about crunching in videos and stuff the night before because I am terrible at planning stuff, and that's just kind of what I do. So you guys will at least have some content for the next couple weeks. But back to the podcast at hand. We are joined by a gentleman all the way over in Pennsylvania. It's been a little while since we've talked to anybody from Pennsylvania, I think. Maybe uh I can't remember if we've had anybody on from Pennsylvania. So Cody, you may be the first, what is it, Pennsylvanian? Is that what you guys call yourself?
That is what we call ourselves, and that's kind of crazy. I feel like I should not be the first.
Well, dude, I don't know. It's 164 episodes. There's been a lot of repeats, obviously, like with Marshall and Phoenix and Jeff and them. But for just for
Yep.
the for some reason, not to be mean to anybody or not, Pennsylvania is not sticking out at the top of my list right now. But we'll get to know Cody on this episode. It's a very interesting episode. Cody kind of like lives the life that I aspire to be, kind of with the media side of things, and we're gonna hear his story into fishing, kind of talk about what he does and how he does that, and then we'll get right back into the swim bait stuff. So it's going to be kind of a hybrid episode. Obviously, as always, we try to focus everything on the podcast about swim baits, but when there's cool people on that are media enhanced, I love to pick their brain on that. Like when we had Matty Wong on and we talked about his camera business and all that, or his media business, I should say, and kind of the life behind the camera. That's what I really like to talk about. That's what I really like to talk to people about outside of the fishing thing. And if they can share both of those, hobbies or aspects of life, then those are really the people I want to talk to because I really enjoy what they have to say. But Cody, before we get too far into it and to kind of stop my yapping session we have going on here, who are you and what do you do, man?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I'm super stoked. I've been waiting to talk to you for a while. I think we've been trying to do this for a little bit, so
Hmm.
I'm stoked. So anyway, so my name's Cody Stauder. I work as a freelance director of photography, and I own a production company called Cinegrade. Cinegrade is a production company that does commercial work, action sports work, and like corporate production. So basically, any kind, we'll basically do any production depending on the client and who hits us up. And
Hmm.
but we kind of specialize in that commercial action sports world. Outside of work, I'm a husband, a dad, and I basically spend most of my free time fishing nowadays. Um, uh, okay, what else? What else did you ask me? Sorry.
No, no, you're good, man. That is you hit the ball out of the park there, dude. Living the
Okay,
American
perfect.
dream, a business owner, you're making some really, really sweet content. You got a nice little family, and I mean, you get to fish, dude. I mean, you're living it up, dude. I mean, there's people that are listening to this, man. Cody's got it all figured out. I'm jealous of him, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I'm still like owning a business is wild. It's like constant like 24/7 job
Yeah.
basically. When I started my production company, I basically took on 20 other jobs that I never had previously when I was working for other companies doing the
Mhm.
same thing. So it's, when I'm working 24/7, but it's really cool because I can make my own schedule. I try my hardest if when I'm not traveling and not working 24/7 to pick one day a week and get out and go fishing. It's just like, the one thing that I get to escape work from, and I get to go check out for the day and just focus on something completely different. So
Yeah,
that's
exactly,
kind of
dude. Yeah.
it's kind of the perfect escape.
Hmm. And like outside being a business owner, I mean, I guarantee that's what 95% of the guys who listen to this episode, they have a family outside of work and they go to work maybe 5, 6 days out of the week. Some people like me are lucky enough to work 4 10, so we only work 4 days a week. But outside of that,
Yep.
like, they have a family, they have a 9 to 5 or, just a daytime job. And that one, maybe it's a Sunday or maybe they don't work on a Monday or whatever it may be, and the family's doing something, they have a day to go and fish. So outside of kind of your story, I mean, we all really share probably the same type of schedule, give or take, hours and
Yep.
stuff like that. I mean,
Yep.
everybody has the same time to fish, unless obviously you are in the fishing industry or you have a crazy
Yep.
cool job where you don't have to maybe be at work or work from home or whatever. But I mean, everybody is all essentially in the same boat, really. So I think I mean, yeah, it's cool to be your own boss, but like you said, you don't only have one job. You're not responsible for one thing. You're responsible for everything. So it has its
Yeah,
own
for
challenges
sure.
in itself.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's like I said, it is a whirlwind when you are working for yourself. There's just so much to do. I mean, coming down like invoices and billing
Yep.
and proposals and all. There's just so much to do. So it's like, like I said, being able to escape is like the one necessary thing that fishing does for me.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, man. All right. So we're going to start off in chronological order, guys. We're going to talk about because we kind of laid this episode out before we started to record here. So we're going to talk, and Cody's going to talk about how he got into fishing, kind of the chronological order about all that happened. And then he will introduce when he, like, when cameras or like media started to become a pivotal point in his life. And then we're going to kind of go on a side tangent about the whole media thing, get all that stuff talked about, get all that stuff out of the way, and then the last third of the episode we'll talk about the swim bait fishing now, how he got into it, and that sort of thing. So just so you guys know, so you're not like, are they going to spend a whole 6 hours talking about cameras or whatever else it may be? Yes, we're going to talk about cameras and stuff, but we are talking about swim bait stuff too. I just wanted to make sure that you guys know that before you get too far into it, and you're like, what the hell? These guys are yapping about cameras the whole episode. But so
We could
Cody,
easily talk about cameras for six
yeah,
hours
yeah.
for
I
sure.
mean, yeah. When I talk to somebody and I know they take camera or take pictures or videos of stuff, that's the first thing I ask. What kind of camera do they shoot with? And it always opens up a whole floodgate of conversation. But Cody,
Totally.
you were saying before we'd started to record that you have, maybe haven't been swim bait fishing or been behind the camera your whole life, but you have been like fishing has been a very big part of your life. So how did you get
Yep.
introduced to that as a younger kid?
Yeah, so I grew up fishing my entire life. Like my dad, literally, when I was in diapers, there's pictures of me like on a dock holding a fishing rod. My dad was a major bass fisherman before I was born. He had a boat that he actually named it uh, after my brother. My brother's name's Justin, and on the back of the boat it said Justin Tough Fishing, so like just into fishing. So anyway, he had that boat like when I was born. And he was also like a tournament, like a local club tournament fishing director. So he would like kind of put the tournaments together and host them and that kind of stuff. And he also had a fishing company called Hogbuster Baits, where they made soft plastic tubes and like soft plastic spider jigs. And this actually super cool lure that I still have a bunch of his lures. He hasn't made them in quite a while, but I still have we had kind of had a stockpile after he stopped making them. But he made this really cool topwater lure called a poppin' tube, which was like basically like a small popper on the front end,
hmm
and then the tail part of it was like a half cut off tube, so it's like a popper with a tube like skirt on the back end, which
Yeah.
was really cool. And we have the Susquehanna River nearby here, so it's like a major smallmouth fishery. So anyway, he was a tournament director like locally, and then yeah, so I grew up, basically like when I was in diapers, he taught me, I was on the boat with him 24/7 basically. So I grew up fishing. Eventually, he actually got rid of that other boat and got what like a tracker. I don't even know if you guys know what these are, but like a tracker inboard jet.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
Tracker makes these boats that have an inboard jet. They don't make them anymore. They like made them in like the 90s and early 2000s. So he got one of those so that we could, because the Susquehanna River is known for being extremely shallow. So you basically have to have a jet motor to be able to run it properly. So he got that boat. So I've basically been a river rat my whole life, kind of fishing the river, and then it hasn't been until the past so in 2020, sorry, I'll go back a little bit further. In 2020, we got rid of my dad's boat and I bought my current boat, which is like a Crestliner XF189, basically a 18-foot aluminum boat that has
Mhm.
a 150 jet on the back.
Yeah.
So it's like a 150 Pro XS motor with a jet pump on the bottom. Um, and that's the current boat that I still fish out of. And it, like I said, I grew up on the river. I've just in the past 5 years really started to branch out and fish lakes more and more. Like we always went to a lake randomly, on a weekend or something like that and would fish. Um, but I've really started to get more into, fishing lakes and largemouth fishing. And that's kind of where like the swim bait fishing started for me.
Mhm.
I started picking up more, bigger baits and fishing more big soft baits and glide baits and stuff like that. And now I've obviously transferred it over to my smallmouth fishing as well, which is like the most fun thing in the world to, get smallmouth to, jump on a fast moving glide bait. Super fun.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's basically my fishing, story.
Heck yeah, dude. Have you heard of the smallmouth games by chance?
I have actually, yeah, and I have
Okay.
actually heard about it from your podcast.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
But
from where the sounds of it where you are, like that would be something that would be right up your alley.
yes, yeah, I have never done it, but I've actually like been considering it, and I think I might jump into it here pretty soon. It's super cool for sure. The things that those guys are doing is really cool.
Yeah, I had actually just seen, must have been Wednesday since yesterday was Thanksgiving. I think they're planning on doing a winter games one, which would be
Oh,
like
sick.
super cool. Like I know there's some rivers throughout the country, like in the Midwest, that are absolute crazy smallmouth fisheries in the winter time.
Yeah,
So that would be a really cool variation of it to see.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'll have to look into that. Our river, like as long as it doesn't ice over, I fish. I mostly in the winter on the river. I'll fish from the bank. Um, And but it's like you can catch them all winter long if you know how. You just got to slow down and know how
Mhm.
to pick them apart, pick it apart. I don't
Yeah.
really fish with swim baits much in the winter, but you can still catch them pretty easily.
Right. Heck yeah, dude. So so my question was kind of you were talking about really fishing the river growing up really
Hmm.
hard and then like just, quote unquote recently getting into the whole lake side of things. Was your
Hmm.
dad like were these tournaments on the river or were they on lakes, but it just wasn't something that you guys would do much outside the tournament fishing like days?
Yeah, most of them were held on the river, but they would
Okay.
do a couple here and there on the local lakes and stuff. Like we don't have a lot of big lakes super close by. Within like an hour and a half, there's some bigger ones, but um, definitely like most people that live like right in our area are fishing the river probably 80% of the time. But then there's a couple good small, a lot of them are like trolling motor only lakes.
Hmm.
But then there's a couple other ones that are within like an hour that you can run the big motor on. But it was just like, smallmouth fishing is just kind of, for a lack of a better term, it's just what's in my blood. That's just what we always did. Like when we were going fishing, it was always on the river. So I know like our stretch of the river really well. Which is it's one of the Susquehanna is known for being like a mile wide and a foot deep. So you have to know it really well to be able to run it most of the time.
Yeah.
So you can definitely get into trouble quick if you don't know where you're going.
It's funny how people aren't familiar with jet motors because like here obviously the salmon and steelhead and like big trout fishing is very massive. So on the
Hmm.
river that connects to on the rivers that connect to Lake Michigan. So like jet boats are a huge part of the fishing like scene here because trout fishing is
Oh,
so
cool.
like
Yeah.
abundant. But like you think
Yeah.
about it and outside of like over by you probably the Midwest, like I'm sure Wisconsin and Michigan, really where the Great Lakes dump into like small tributaries, and then like out west, like Oregon and Washington, really maybe Upper California too. Like jet
Yep.
motors, like don't really have a place anywhere else throughout the country,
No,
at
for
least
sure.
like to my knowledge, because everything else is like accessible by a prop motor.
For sure. Dude, it's even crazy. Like we go to, every year we try to do like a week-long trip to a bigger body of water somewhere just on like a vacation during the summer.
Yeah.
And so we've been to like Thousand Islands and Cayuga and places like that and up in Canada and a few places. But like we've had people just at Cayuga like come up to our boat and be like, "What is that thing?"
Yeah.
Like, and it's crazy because like you're not that far from the Susquehanna. Like, would you think that they would at least know what it is? But there's
Mhm.
just people that just have never even seen it or heard of it before.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, like here. it's not uncommon. It's kind of a funny insight to where I live and kind of how remote it is. It is not uncommon for guys to buy like a 16-foot like aluminum, flat bottom,
Hmm.
and to
Yeah, for
cut out
sure.
like a 3-foot section in the middle of the transom in the back and buy a cheap jet
Yep.
ski and rip it apart and install a jet motor. Like that is not uncommon around here
Oh,
at
that's true.
all. I've got 3 words for you: Lake Pro Tackle. Lake Pro Tackle has all the gear you need to be ready to have a successful day on the water. Friends of the podcast receive 10% off your orders while using code SCALES at checkout. Checking out with code SCALES not only saves you guys some money, but it also helps me host more giveaways to give back to you guys, the listeners. On their website, you can find exclusive and rare swim baits, JDM and BFS products, and of course, conventional tackle. I can't forget to mention Lake Pro Tackle gets the monthly throwback shop colors at the beginning of every month. Also, orders over $50 get free shipping, including rods. So do me a favor and remember to use code SCALES at checkout to save 10% at lakeprotackle.com. The vast majority of double-digit bass caught in Mexico are caught out of 2 lakes, Lake Bacharach and Lake El Salto. Josh Daniels Pro Bass Adventures is the only outfitter in Mexico with lodges on both of these trophy lakes. With a fleet of Ranger boats at Lake El Salto and Live Scope Plus at Lake Bacharach, Pro Bass Adventures has the best equipped guides and boats in Mexico. Better call Pro Bass 480-491-9300 or probassadventures.com. We are Mexico Fishing. Staring at that peanut butter jelly like a largemouth bass staring at a dollar store worm? Then it's time to upgrade your snackuation. Meat Crafters' line of handmade small batch pre-sliced salamis and our charcuterie make the perfect base for your weekend snackle box. Fill a Plano 3600 with an assortment of Meat Crafters' old style salami and charcuterie, and you're sure to become the boat ramp champ. Listeners of the show can use code SCALES and SLICES at checkout on meatcrafters.com to save 20% off your cart. The code can be used as many times as you want, so you'll never run out of fuel for your pursuit of giants. So the next time you reach into your fridge to load up your boat cooler, skip the fish food and grab the stack of Meat Crafters pre-sliced packs. They're guaranteed to exceed your PB.
That's actually super cool. There's a company here in Pennsylvania called Rockproof Boats, and there's a couple other ones as well, but they put like, the Rotex motors in like a
Yeah.
flat bottom jet boat. I've actually been considering maybe going that route from where I'm at with my current boat, but I don't know. Right now, I love my boat and it's paid off, so that's actually a
Right.
major
Yeah.
plus.
Yeah, there. Fun fact: there. I should preface this by saying there was a company like that here in, it was either Michigan or Wisconsin, and they would, or maybe even New York, but they would build super badass jet boats, and it was always
Hmm.
kind of like a interesting company. And my uncle got in on essentially a pre-order. Like those are the type of boats
Hmm.
like buy to pre-order, buy to order type
Yep.
thing, or
Yep.
buy to build. And he bought it, and he ended up waiting like 6 years for it, and he never got it.
Oh,
And so it
geez.
was a part of a huge
Wow.
lawsuit, and then he finally got the boat, and then his money kicked back to him. But that it's funny that you brought that up because there is a
That's
couple companies
crazy.
like that, and I know that a couple of them have gotten popped for not providing the goods that they were charging for.
Wow. Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, I know like the Rockproof company I mentioned, and I think most of the other ones around here are like a year out, but
Yeah.
they're very reputable and do a
Right.
good job, and they're very well repped by all the local fishermen and stuff. Like when you go to fish a tournament around here, that's what
Mhm.
most of the people are running, or that's at least what everyone wishes they were running.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Kind of like the quote unquote industry standard almost.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And I mean,
Yeah.
that's to say that like there's bad apples and everything. Like, if people are familiar with like the street racing car scene, I mean, there's always
Hmm.
posts of people going to drop cars off in garages, and they come back a year and a
Oh
half
yeah,
later,
for
and their
sure.
car's gutted outside this building, and it was never touched after they ripped the motor and the turbos out of it, and their
Oh yeah.
car's SOL. I mean, that's like very common too. Same thing, pretty much.
Yeah, I actually know that industry very well as well. My brother has a fabrication company called Neverlift Auto Fab, and he does super high end turbo manifolds and exhausts and stuff like that for race cars and stuff. So he's very well tuned into that whole industry as well.
Yeah, man. Like I said, there's always a couple bad apples that ruin it for everybody, or kind of put a shadowing over the industry and kind of make the buyers a little weary. I mean, that's even to say with
Yep.
the swim bait scene too. I mean, that's a very unfortunately common thing that we see in our industry too.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
But so kind of got the lowdown on how you got into fishing. So we talked about I guess we kind of not necessarily spoiled it, but people know that officially know that you have a media company and that you partake
Mhm.
in like media coverage for companies and stuff and like doing videos and commercial scene stuff. So, how did
Yep.
that whole thing start for you? Or like, when did you get your first camera? Or when did you realize like that was something that you wanted to pursue in life?
Okay, yeah. So this is I'll start from the beginning and try to
Heck
put it
yeah.
in chronological order for you as
Perfect.
much as I can. So I grew up riding BMX actually. That was like so uh you know, fishing was just back then was more of like a weekend hobby with my dad kind of thing, but like my biggest passion that I loved to do when I was a kid was ride BMX. So like go to the skate park and do tricks on a BMX bike. Um, so I grew up doing that when I was like 15. I had a birthday coming up, and I actually had another friend, two friends actually, that had cameras at the time and were like filming BMX videos with our friends and stuff like that. And I always thought it was super cool. And I told my dad, I was like, hey, I'd love to a camera for my birthday. So, long story short, he ended up buying me a camera for my 15th birthday. It was like one of those little I said a high eight tape, I think is what it took or something like that.
Mhm.
And a little fisheye, like screw on fisheye
Oh,
for it basically.
classic.
So I just started, yeah. So basically just like everyone, making skate videos when they were a kid, but for me it was BMX. So yeah, I just, started filming BMX videos and editing BMX videos of my friends and I. And eventually like took like a Photoshop class in school and a video class in school and just kind of, continued to further my interest in that, I guess. Um, and at that time I was like making like 3-minute just edits of just like my friends out riding BMX and going to the skate park and just doing trips to Philadelphia and stuff like that. Um, and then eventually I was coming to the end of my like high school career and I was still filming and learning Photoshop and I decided to go to college. And I actually had two friends, which oddly enough were the two friends that I knew that had the cameras earlier on. They had moved to Los Angeles and went to a school in Los Angeles called the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising.
Ooh.
And they had a media program. So they had like, yeah, so it's basically known as mostly as like a fashion school. It's like basically like the FIT of the East Coast, but it's on the West Coast kind of thing. Um, but they had a pretty good digital media program at the time. So I decided to move away from home and go out to California when I was 18 and went to college out there. And basically I learned like, Final Cut editing, which had already kind of started doing in high school, but it, again, just furthered my knowledge a little bit more. So I learned like Final Cut. I learned a program called After Effects, which you do like motion graphics in.
Yeah, yep.
I learned a program called Maya, which is what they do like Pixar movies and stuff in. And then InDesign, Photoshop, all the like print and still image programs as well. Um, Eventually graduated. It was like a 2-year program or whatever. So I then graduated. I decided to move back home to Pennsylvania afterwards. So I moved back to Pennsylvania, and I guess I forgot to mention this. Growing up, I grew up near a place called Woodward, which is like an action sports mecca,
Hmm.
basically. So it's an action, mostly known as action sports camp, where like kids can go and pay a week to go there and skateboard, BMX, inline scooter, basically any type of action sports. And they also have gym and cheerleading and all these other things. And so it's basically like a sports summer camp. So that's like 35 minutes from where I grew up, and it's like the best skate parks in the entire world. So it's an Olympic training facilities and everything. It's crazy. So I decided when I was like 15, 16, I got a job there because if you worked there in the summers, you could then ride your bike there all winter long when it's snowing and miserable here in Pennsylvania and you can't really ride anywhere else. So I got a job so that I could, ride basically all year round. And I did that for 2 summers. And which basically allowed me to ride my bike at Woodward whenever I wanted. So then after college, again, I said I moved back to Pennsylvania. I actually got a job at Woodward because they were starting what was going to be a digital media camp. Um, and I was hired as a graphic arts instructor originally. So I basically came in, and the program had been run one year before this, but it was like growing and kind of getting bigger. So I came in as a graphic arts instructor. So I taught like young high school kids that would come to this camp, like they sign up for a graphic arts camp basically,
Hmm.
and they come to camp and get a college level week-long crash course basically
Wow.
into there was graphic arts, photography, video production. Um, and this was basically the coolest thing is like, the kids who were doing video, they had all of the skateboarders at camp to go film and make their videos out of, and just like endless possibilities. So it was super cool. Um, so anyway, I got hired as the graphic arts instructor originally, but then throughout that first summer, I started doing more BMX video production for them. So I basically became the full-time BMX video content creator as well. So they obviously have a whole YouTube channel, and they're originally this was before they had a YouTube, but they had their own like content service on their website. But now they have a whole YouTube channel and all that kind of stuff. Um, so anyway, we would create week-long videos where like a pro BMX rider would come to camp and I would film with them and make like an edit of their week at the camp, basically. So I was doing that and then also instructing, and I did that. Well, eventually like became like a director of that program and kind of helped build it. And we had this like 5,000 square foot studio. So a giant studio space with a cyc wall, which is like a wall with with like transition at the bottom. So you can shoot photos on it and it looks like it's a infinite white wall type of thing.
Hmm.
Um, so we had like a whole space and had a psych wall in there. We had like 50 computer stations where the kids would come in and sit down and learn to edit or learn Photoshop and all those things. So I did that for 3 summers, and so I started there in 2010 was when I graduated college. Worked until about 2013, and in 2013 there was. So do you know Travis Pastrana? He's like an action sports guy, motocross
Yeah.
rider.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Travis Pastrana, my boss at the time at Woodward, for all the stuff I had just mentioned, his name was Dave Meddy. He used to be head judge at X Games Mega Ramp, so he
Damn.
would, for skateboarding. So he was head judge for Mega Ramp skateboarding, and he knew Travis, and Travis knew that he was involved in the media stuff at Woodward. So Travis went to him at one of the X Games and was like, "Hey, I want to do this video contest thing at my house. Would you mind helping me put it together?" And Dave, of course, was like, "Yeah, for sure." Like they'd been friends for a while, obviously. So he's like, "Yeah, let's do it." Then as they start to put it together, they're looking for like filmers and trying to put this like contest together. And my boss Dave asked me if I wanted to go and be like a part of the contest and be one of the people involved in the contest, and I was like, "Yeah, fuck yeah." Like that sounds awesome. Um, so yeah, we went down basically, this was a couple months after he had asked about the contest thing. We go down to Travis's, and there's 7 filmers at Travis. I believe it was seven filmers at Travis's. So we all get invited to Travis Pastrana's house, basically. So everyone goes down to Travis's house, and we get there, and no one really knows what's going on. Like it's kind of like you know weren't given any information before we got there. But then they do this big announcement that they're doing a video contest, and each filmer that was invited was going to get 3 Nitro Circus riders, and we basically had a week to make the best video that we could. There was no rules, like you could leave, you could fly to Australia if you had the money to. You could do whatever you wanted. There was zero rules. But obviously, none of us had any money, so we all stayed at Travis's. Um, and we just basically, everyone went their separate ways and just filmed the best video that they could that week. Um, and I was partnered with, so funny enough, Brandon Schmidt, who was a good friend of mine from Woodward, right before this became a rider for Nitro Circus. And he happened to be put on my team. So that was awesome because him and I were obviously great friends right off the bat. So it was super easy to, because we didn't know any of the guys at this point, so we were getting to know everyone and just kind of figuring it out as we went. So it was good to have him like on my team because we were already, homies. Um, so yeah, Brandon was on my team, Dusty Weigel and Maddie Wyatt, who are all great friends of mine nowadays. But at that time, I didn't know any of them. Um, so yeah, we had a week to make the best video we could. The videos are on YouTube somewhere. I'm sure I could dig it up for you, but it's like, buried, obviously. This is 2013 or something like that, or 2012 maybe. That this contest, I think it was 2013 was actually when the contest was. But anyway, so long story short, we make the best, everyone makes their video for the week. We do this premiere, and my team ends up winning the contest, which was super cool. Um, and they one of the directors for Nitro Circus at the time, his name was Dove Ribnick. He came over to me afterwards. He was like, "Man, we loved what you did. That was super cool. We would love to work with you in the future." And I was like, "Of course." I was a young kid that hadn't had a crazy amount of experience in my career, so I was stoked. Like that was the coolest thing I'd ever heard. Um, and so months go by with just radio silence. And I just kind of like wrote it off and was like, that was a cool experience. I doubt anything will ever come from it. And then Dove gives me a call one day, and he's like, "Hey man, how you doing? Do you want to go to Australia next week?" And I was like, "Dude, I don't even have a passport." like I had never really been out of the country. He's like, "Well, we're going to Australia for a tour for a month. Do you want to go?" And I was like, I was like, "Yeah, of course." So I like rush ordered a passport, got it in time, and left for Australia for a month. And just lived with basically so there's different Nitro tours. Some of them were living off a tour bus, some of them were staying in hotels, and that was a hotel one. So we basically just bounced between hotels, between cities, and did these massive shows in giant arenas in front of crowd. And I was just there, filming and making videos of the whole thing. So then, we come home from that. I go back to working at Woodward for the summer, and I'm there for another couple months and don't really hear much from Dove. And then again, he calls me kind of last minute. He's like, "Hey man, would you want to move to California?" And I was like, "When?" And he's like, "Yeah, as soon as possible, really." So I was like, "Oh man." So like by the end of the summer, I basically packed up, asked a friend of mine, Christian, if he wanted to move to California, and we both moved. We drove cross country together and moved out to California for a few years. Um, and then so I worked at the Nitro offices, which were in San Clemente, California at the time. So I worked out of the offices for a few years. Was still doing constant traveling and live tours, which is like they literally do those tours all over the world. Like
Yeah.
I've been to like New Zealand and Australia, both like 6 times for each of those. I've been to Japan twice, Abu Dhabi twice, Dubai, South Africa, Europe a bunch, all over the U.S. just on those tours. Um, so I did that for a few years, and then sadly enough, we found out my dad got sick. So my dad actually ended up being diagnosed with cancer, which was obviously the worst thing ever. So I decided to move back to Pennsylvania again. So I moved back. I still continued to work kind of remotely for Nitro for like a next year or so. And that's when I decided at that point that I was kind of getting burnt out on the Nitro Circus thing because it was
Hmm.
just, basically the same thing over and over again for like 5 years. It was just, or 4 years, whatever it was. It was just becoming really kind of monotonous, because it just was the same thing over and over again, and I was traveling a lot. Um, so I decided to start my production company, Cinegrade, just so I could try to focus my career into more of what I really wanted to try to do, which is more of that like higher end commercial work rather than like the Nitro Circus content is a lot of like run and gun stuff. So it's like really fun. The guys, hanging out with the guys is like the most fun of all time. It's like you're just hanging out with your best friends every day. But it's a lot of run and gun video production. So you're just like chasing after the guys and filming funny stuff and cool stuff, but you don't get to curate what you're doing that much. But I really liked the like lighting and higher end side of production where you like walk into a room and you get to light something and create something really cool that never existed.
Hmm.
So that's kind of what I enjoy the most. So I started my production company Cinegrade and tried to move myself more into that higher end commercial type of work. And that was in 2019. And I did that for a few years, and actually then Travis drugged me back into a thing that we recently started called Channel 199, which was Travis Pastrana's YouTube channel. So he started his own YouTube channel. He brought me in for the first like year and a half, basically, to get it off the ground and to try to get everything set up and just get as many followers as possible and create the best content as possible, basically to just try to get it started. So I did that for a year and a half and was also still running Cinegrade at the same time. So it's like I was, basically I had 2 full-time jobs, which is a lot and almost too much for me and my family. But as of September, I have now stepped away from that and I've gone back to just running Cinegrade full time, which is, like I said, because of the schedule and stuff, it was just too much. So it's like I'm back. It's almost the best of both worlds now because I still get to go do, like, I was just at Travis's the other day doing a single, shoot, and I get to pick and choose what I want to do now. But I also get to run my business full time again and just focus on my family a little bit more.
Right. Heck yeah, dude. So, a couple questions that I was kind of writing down what they're writing down from what you were sharing. So, kicking
Yeah.
it all the way back to the beginning. So, I haven't gone to school for any of the like the programming stuff or InDesign, Photoshop, Adobe, any of the Adobe Suite stuff or anything like that.
Hmm.
So, it's kind of more of like I go to YouTube University whenever I have a question. I type it
Yeah.
in and kind
Yeah,
of
for sure.
learn whatever I
Yep.
have to learn. Do you think that that kind of like that 2 years of schooling and breaking down all that stuff, like kind of in the classroom, did that really set you up well for kind of the what you ended up doing later in the later years that you kind of weren't really expecting or kind of planning for?
So not really, to be honest with you. Like, I think what going to college did for me more than anything was give me a work ethic that I didn't quite, well, I guess I had before, but I hadn't honed in. But like, obviously going to college, it's a lot. Like, especially, in the art school I was in, it was constant projects and
Yeah.
constant deadlines and just like stuff that I had never really had to experience before that. As far as like learning the programs and stuff like that, I don't feel like I got like an exuberant amount of experience that I couldn't have gotten from YouTube or something like
Yeah.
that. Even nowadays, when I have a question and I don't know how to do something, I just YouTube it. Like, I do
Mhm.
the same thing that you do. We all do the same thing. Like, that's YouTube college is, if I could go back, I would probably not go to school and I would just save the money and just learn. I would the like if anyone wants to get into production, the best thing to do is just get on set. Like, if you want to be on in a video or working in the video production side of things or in the photography side of things, just getting on set will give you so much more knowledge and information than going to school ever will. Um, that's harder, obviously, when it's program specific and when you're doing InDesign and stuff like that. The only thing you can't necessarily sit down with someone physically and have them show you how to do it. You have to just YouTube it, which is fine. But I personally like learn a lot quicker when someone shows me how to do something, you
Yeah.
know? So yeah, I don't think it's necessary for people to go to school for production at all, if that's your question. Um, I think it definitely can help. Like, when you go to a high-end film school, I think the biggest production or the biggest thing that it does for people is gives them a network to work with after they get out of school.
Mm-hmm.
That, because like you're basically leaving school, you already know 50 people that are doing the same thing that you're
Yeah.
doing. You know all of your instructors, which most of the instructors are industry professionals as well. Like, they're actively out working as well. They're just teaching on the side.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, for me it was work ethic. I don't The school that I went to, I don't have a crazy amount of people that I still even keep in contact with. I have a few, but not any that like I work with or anything like that. They're
Yeah.
just friends that I stay in contact with. But I do know kids that went to like FIT and stuff like that, or not kids. I know friends that went to FIT
Mm-hmm.
for film, and they are extremely successful. Like, my one friend Brendan Hall, he works for Nat Geo and does incredible stuff. But he had a massive network when he left school. So he still works with a lot of those people to this day.
Yeah, yeah, and that's like kind of learning all the software and stuff is super cool, but like I was thinking, I mean, from 2000, I'll just say 2012 to now, like there's been how many integrations and how many updates of that stuff
Mhm.
where, yeah,
Oh
you may
yeah,
have
for
gone to
sure.
school for it then, but you still have to look at how to do this new stuff or like, new transition
Yep.
styles or whatever it may be. Like there's like, it's kind of that thing where you constantly have to learn everything that's getting updated into all these programs.
100%. Yeah, it's never ending at this point. Like, every time a new update comes out, you have to relearn the program. You have to relearn whatever the new implementation was or whatever it is that they added. You have to figure it out and learn it. But like nowadays, most of what I do is camera operating.
Yeah.
I still edit 90% of what I create. I do have other editors that I work with depending on the projects and stuff like that, but I don't do nearly the amount of like graphic arts and 3D work that I used to do. I'll just hire out for that stuff now because I just don't have the time, and really I don't have the interest anymore either. Like I just want to be behind the camera and creating stuff with the camera nowadays.
Yeah, yeah. I'm kind of the same way. Like if I can create it with the camera and make it as close to post production in camera, and then like the minimal amount of like work on the computer, that's what I try to do. Like Marshall and I were talking the other day, and he was editing a video for something else outside of what he does, and he was like, it's kind of crazy how if people like aren't familiar with vlogging, like how much they record 43 minutes of video and you chop it down to 16
Oh,
minutes of
dude, for
video.
sure.
Whereas like if somebody's familiar with the camera and familiar with talking to a camera and kind of what it takes to make a video for YouTube, they only might have 23 minutes of talking on camera and they chop it down to
Mhm.
17 minutes. He's like, it's interesting to see like how all that stuff kind of goes together.
Dude, for sure. It's actually funny. We went through this same issue when we started Channel 199. Like we have all come from a production background where we used to make TV shows for Nitro Circus, you know? So like when we were filming stuff, we were filming as much content as possible so that we could make 7 episodes, like, a series, basically
Yeah.
a 7 episode series for TV. But now we're shooting for one episode, but we were shooting 8 hours a day for a,
Wow.
10-minute episode, and then everyone's like, hey, why is it taking so long for everyone to edit these? I'm like, guys, you don't understand. There's 7 cameras rolling for 8 hours a day. Like, it's an insane amount of content to go through.
Yeah, we almost have
So
80 hours that we have to chop up
yeah,
for a
totally.
10-minute
Yeah.
block.
Yeah, so we eventually started scaling things back and just, limiting the amount of camera operators and really trying to focus our shoots onto like what we need and what, not try to film that much fluff. But it's hard with like action sports stuff because
Yeah.
a lot of the time the stuff you're doing is life threatening, right? Like you can't just like not be rolling. Like
Hmm.
if someone's trying something, you have to shoot it because if something goes wrong, if you don't film it, then that's you're in big trouble basically. And the other thing is like with Nitro, it's like the joke was always that like we were trying to catch what was it trying to catch like magic in a bottle or whatever the saying is
Yeah, like
like
lightning in a
um
bottle.
lightning in a bottle, yeah, trying to catch lightning in a bottle because like if you're like I said, like everything that happens, like if it's just these like magical moments throughout the day. And if you're not filming them and you're just sitting around, then obviously you miss the moments. So it's like so hard with that crew because there's just always so many incredible things happening that if you're not always rolling, you're just missing stuff. So we had to like get to a point where we were like, guys, don't get on the bike, like don't ride, like don't do anything until we're ready
Yeah.
because we're just wasting footage or you're going to do something and we're not going to get it. And then that's going to be a problem. So we basically just had to like scale back as much as we could and just try to really focus. Like YouTube is a completely different beast than television, than
Hmm.
movies, than anything. It's its own thing altogether. So like I said, we didn't come from that background, so we had to try to kind of learn it.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say like I was really young, but like my parents would watch Nitro Circus and stuff, and so I watched it secondhand. But like when they
Oh,
would go
sick.
down in like
Nice.
the trikes or the shopping carts and stuff like
Yeah.
that, like that is
Yep.
stuff that they might do it 3 times and land it twice, but that big wipeout they have the
Yeah.
third time that you're not recording on, you're kind of SOL because they're not gonna do it again for you.
Exactly. Exactly. Like you have to roll every time. Yeah, and it's funny. Like I grew up watching Nitro Circus too. So like the whole thing, like when I got invited down to Travis's the original time, it was like mind blowing to me. I was like, wait, what am I doing? Like, how did this happen? It was just super cool.
Yeah, that's I mean that's absolutely insane. And so the thing with the Nitro Circus stuff, so they had the show for a couple seasons or whatever not it was on TV, and then the YouTube stuff
Yep.
too, like you were talking about, or video stuff for like around that time. Oh, excuse me, like social media was starting to kind of pick up and whatnot, like starting to be on that brink
Yep.
there. What like
Yep.
you talked about being burnt out, and was that just essentially because you were recording and like filming, not necessarily the same stuff, but not even that it was scripted, but it was like it was the same like layout of events
Yep.
everything. And so I mean to a point like I like to think of myself as a creative person, but after 5 magazines that I design, it's like what can I do different for the sixth one? Is that kind of what it is for you too? Like how can or like how could I show this information at a different perspective than I have for the last 25 episodes I've recorded for or whatever else it may be.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So like when I started with Nitro, like when I said I went on that first tour, that was basically the end of like that first Australia tour was the one of the last seasons that they did for the television show.
Okay, yeah.
Um and funny enough, actually, when we were down at Travis's doing our contest, they were also filming an episode. So what we were doing was like a small part of that episode, but it was also like they were, just doing crazy training and just hitting massive jumps. So most of the episode was about that, but like we were like a small side story in the episode. Um, but then when I said we started the YouTube stuff, I made the first ever YouTube series for Nitro Circus. Like it's called Nitro Circus Uncovered, I believe. It was from that first Australia tour that I went on, and we basically made like a 7 episode like mini series on YouTube, and it was the first like real series that Nitro had ever done.
Mm,
Um, but then yeah, so it just became like it was, I think it was 5 years by the time I started, kind of stepped away and started Cinegrade.
yeah.
So it was just like when you're filming that kind of content, it's just like repetitive. Like
Yep.
you can only film the same trick from so many different angles before you're out of angles to film that
Hmm.
trick from, because like there's specific tricks in action sports that have to be filmed from specific angles
Yeah.
because you have to show what the rider's doing on the bike or on the skateboard. And if you film it from the wrong angle, you can't see that, right? So you have to know the trick and know what they're doing to be able to get the right angles. So there's only certain ways you can really shoot each trick. And obviously, there's a lot of cool things you can do with dollies and movies and all kinds of really cool things for like adding camera movement, which I was doing on a lot of these shoots. Um, but I really just wanted to get into the side of things where we were taking time and like writing scripts and stories and like lighting things, because that's one thing with Nitro. It's like when you're in the stadium's pre-lit basically. The only thing we ever really lit was just like small interview setups and stuff like that. But I really wanted to get into, when you do a commercial for like a food commercial, you light everything. You basically start with a black room and light it from there.
Hmm.
So that's kind of the side of things that I really wanted to get into. Because with Nitro, it's like almost every Nitro video is basically like, oh my gosh, this guy's gonna try something that like he might die.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
he's like, he almost died, and then no, he made it. Like that's the storyline every single time, right?
Right.
So it's like, so it just became like, editing that for 5 years just got to a point where I was like, man, I just need something different.
Yeah, yeah, dude, I understand completely. I mean, it's up to the it's up to a point like with everything up to a certain degree like everything is a repetition in itself where might not necessarily maybe burnt out isn't the right word, but like you kind of get just
Yeah.
dragged by like doing the same repetitive stuff. Like you need to have some kind
Yes.
of something to spice it up into a realm where you were with like Nitro Circus. Like Nitro Circus is a thing that does the same stuff. It's what Nitro Circus is based around is like
Yep.
the crazy acrobatic stunts performed in high
Yep.
flying jumps and all that sort of stuff, crazy stuff. But to a point, you can only get so much B-roll. You can only attach a GoPro so many different
Totally.
angles to a shopping cart or to a trike.
Right.
Like to a point, it's maybe not recycling content's not the right phrase, but I mean essentially that's kind of what you're doing is kind of what camera
Yes.
angle can I plug this into that I haven't done in the last 25 episodes type thing.
Totally, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's a constant like uh revolving wheel where it just like one thing, it's like you're filming one thing and it's several years after you've done something similar, but you're like, man, didn't we already do this?
Yeah.
Or like haven't we done this? Like it just feels very similar, even though it's not. It's like we're always doing new things and trying to like recreate the wheel, but it's just like it's just from the video side, there's only so many things you can do, and a lot of the times you're just chasing the guys around because it's like I said, it's run and gun
Hmm.
content. So like it's me and maybe one or two other camera guys, and then there's 10 quote unquote talent, and we
Yeah.
basically have to just run around and just chase them as much as we can to get funny sound bites and make sure we're filming the action and all that. So it's just a constant like crazy, like we always say it's just herding cats,
Yeah.
because really like the guys who are riding don't give a crap about the video production. I mean, they do a little bit, but like they're focused on just trying to make sure that
Landing
they
a
land
trick
and
or
don't hurt
something. Yeah.
themselves, like so like it's like they are not waiting for you. They're like if they're ready, they're just gonna go and you have to be ready for it.
Yeah, exactly. Last question that I have kind of pertaining to the Nitro Circus stuff, not saying we won't kind of loop back to it, but
Sure.
what kind of like was it okay, so this is kind of a two-part question. Was it like freelance
Okay.
stuff where you brought your gear from home and was filming for them? And then kind of what was like the industry standard? Like was there kind of a minimum that they asked you to film with or like settings to film with so that it would look good blown up on a huge TV in somebody's living room, or kind of what was like the checklist for filming for Nitro Circus?
Okay, yeah. So when I first started, I had what was called a Canon 5D Mark III.
Yeah, yep.
Um, which, and I had a thing called a glide cam, which is like a handheld like stabilizer thing. So I would basically kind of run around, and that's how I got most of the like cool content that they really liked was just on a wide angle lens on this glide cam. So that camera didn't shoot any crazy high like frame rates or crazy high resolution at the time because it just didn't really exist. Like
Hmm.
it shot like good 1920 1080 video. I think it shot 60p and that was the most that it would shoot. Um, Outside of, and that was my personal camera setup. And yes, I did take that with me on basically every tour and I shot with it constantly. But at the time, Nitro had an FS 700, which was like a more video production uh, oriented camera, but it also had a little bit higher end frame rates and stuff like that. But we only used it for specific things. And eventually, so early on, yeah, we were just shooting 1920 1080. A lot of the time we were shooting 2398. But then eventually we started shooting, which 20, sorry, I should probably simplify this a little
No,
bit.
I was just
2398.
about to say you're good. I was gonna make
Yeah.
that disclaimer that if you guys don't understand what we're saying, I apologize greatly, but we'll get back to something that
Yeah.
you guys will
Yeah. I'll
understand.
try. I'll try to break it down a little bit more. So like 2398 is the frame rate of the camera. So when you're watching television, usually television is 2997, so it's 29.97 frames per second. We used to shoot 23.98 frames per second because that's what's typically used in like film. So like when you're watching a film in the theaters, that's usually shot in 2398, or they also call it 24 frames per second.
Mhm.
Eventually, we started shooting in 2997 more because we were delivering direct to television, which when you shoot 2398, it's hard to deliver in 2997 just because the frame rates are off and like the program's making frames when they're not actually there. I
Yeah.
know that's really confusing and we just probably not something we even want to talk about because it's just going to be over everyone's heads. Um, but anyway, like we used to shoot in that. Eventually, we got better cameras at Nitro. We moved up to what there was called an FS7 at the time.
Oh yeah.
So Nitro had a few FS7s. At that time, we started shooting more 4K. So we were shooting a lot of 4K, still in 2398 or 2997, just depending on what the use case was. Like if we knew it was going to YouTube, we would typically shoot 2398. But if we knew it was going to television, we would shoot 2997. And eventually, I personally got what was called a Canon C100 Mark II. That's kind of what I upgraded to from my 5D, and that was more of like a video production camera. Like it had XLR ins and had NDs built in, and more. It was just more tailored towards higher end video production. And at that same time, I bought what was called a Ronin M, which was like the smaller version of the original Ronin. And that was my first electronic gimbal before I was still using that glide cam.
Hmm.
So basically bought that camera and a gimbal. And I had known basically because of using the glide cam, I kind of had a jump start on using the gimbal. So I started doing more of that and just kind of adapted that into my workflow. And then eventually sold that C100. I bought my first Red camera, which is a higher end like cinema camera that costs quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
Um, and well, sorry, no, before that, I went to Sony FS5. Had that for a while, and I still continue to have that. And I bought my Red, so I had two cameras at the time. My first Red camera was a Red Gemini, so it was a 5K Red camera. Had that for probably 4 years. It was a fantastic camera. I loved it. It was, beautiful image. The FS5 was also great too. That's the thing about video production nowadays. Like, it doesn't really matter what camera you're shooting on. They're all so similar in quality. Like, one gives you a slight advantage over the other, and some cheaper cameras have advantages over more expensive cameras in other areas. Um, but nowadays, I sold my first Red camera to a good friend of mine, and I bought the newer current Red camera, which is called a Red Raptor X. So that's an 8K cinema camera. It's incredible camera. That's what I've shot the higher end commercial stuff that I've done this year on, and I absolutely love it. And I also bought a Sony FX6, which is basically the updated version of the FS5 that I used to have. And
Yeah.
in addition to that, I have a bunch of GoPros. I have an A7S III. I have, DSLRs. I have all kind. I have literally have, more camera equipment than anyone should ever probably own, because I have my production company. Like, I have equipment for basically everyone on set. So like, if I hire what's called a first AC, which is like a focus puller. So if I'm operating the camera, he's pulling the focus for me. So I have like the kit for him. I have monitors. I have stuff for obviously lighting scenes. I have a whole bunch of camera equipment. Um, but it's just because that's like, owning a production company, that's basically what's required.
Yeah, yeah. If anybody was, if anybody pauses and looks up these cameras, especially the red cameras, they're gonna be like, "Oh, like Cody's legit. He's not like your average YouTuber or your average content creator."
Yeah, no, yeah. Yeah, like the current camera that I have is used to make feature films. Like, it
Yeah,
is it is a serious real deal camera for sure.
yeah. It
And that's
is
why,
a
because I
legit camera.
yeah, yeah. Like, like I said, I try to do, base my company like to specialize in commercial work, and commercial work takes a very lot of high-end equipment to make it happen. So that's kind of why I own most of this stuff.
Yeah. Um, so I've got three more questions regarding the media stuff. So first question
Okay.
is, did you film the 2020 Hoonigan video with Travis when he's ripping through that empty town in the rally car?
No, no, so I didn't. I actually went to, there's the one, so you're talking about the one in Annapolis, I believe. That was the first one that Travis did. That's his like hometown.
Yeah, yeah,
I
where he
did
ends
not.
at his house, he drifts into
Yeah.
his driveway.
Yeah, I did not film that. I actually don't really know the Hoonigan guys all that well. I've been around them a few times, obviously, with Travis, but I just never really connected with them enough to really like get on shoots with them. But I did go down to the second one that Travis did, which was down in Florida, which was when, if you ever watched it, he had a major base jumping accident and like broke his pelvis and had crazy internal bleeding from a base jumping accident, where he jumped off the roof and the parachute. Uh, Opened too late, so he was basically too close to the ground, and it didn't
Mm,
slow him down enough, and he just basically pile drived himself into the ground. It was terrifying to watch. But anyway, I was down there for that because I got hired from a company called Black Rifle Coffee Company to come down and shoot like a behind the scenes of the whole thing, because they were fairly heavily involved, because there was a lot of military helicopters and
yeah.
jets and stuff like that in that one that were used. So they were like, choreographing all of that and making sure all of that was done properly. So I was shooting for them so that they could tell their behind the scenes story. So I was there for that, and that's when I met most of, Brian Scotto and all those guys from Hoonigan. That's the first time I actually met all those guys. But yeah, I have never worked on any of the gymkhanas or anything like that.
Damn, damn. I was hoping you were gonna say yeah and give us some crazy. If
Yeah,
you
yeah,
guys are into
yeah.
cars,
Sorry.
look up that 2020 Hoonigan video because it is an absolute crazy video. I remember during COVID when that video dropped and watching it, and I was just like, "Oh my gosh, this is absolutely crazy."
Yeah,
The ending, absolutely badass when he jumps the river with the little tugboat or whatever kind of boat going underneath.
yep.
I mean, just an absolutely crazy video. But so I just had to know if you were somebody who got to work on that set or not.
Yeah, no, not that one. I've been involved in just about everything else with Travis over the past 10, 12 years or whatever it is, but that's the one thing that I never got to do.
Ah, damn. Next question was, have you gotten Travis into fishing yet? You know, everybody from the power sports like the skating, BMX stuff, kind of always one way or another seems to find their way into the fishing scene. Have you kind of have you cultivated Travis into getting into the swim bait scene yet?
Okay, so funny enough, I went to the Bassmaster Classic with Travis last year.
Really?
He, yes, so the Yokohama was a big sponsor of last year's Bassmaster Classic, and Travis is a big Yokohama athlete. Um, and at the Bassmaster Classic last year, they did a uh, what do you call it? A celebrity tournament.
Oh, yes.
And
Yeah.
Travis, yeah. So Travis was invited through Yokohama to be a part of that tournament. The funny thing is, Travis has absolutely no idea how to fish.
Oh,
Like
that's
zero,
funny.
zero. He didn't even know how to. He didn't even know how to cast on the morning of. Like the only time he had ever really been on the water was when we were in Australia with this crazy like Australian surfer fishing crew called the Mad Hueys. We'd been on the water with them a few times. He actually went down, I think, to Florida and did some offshore fishing with Scott Martin on one of Scott Martin's major offshore boats.
Oh, yeah.
He did like that just randomly like a year before, but he had never been bass fishing ever in his life. So we get there. We meet with Scott the night before, which is super cool for me because my dad was like a major Roland Martin fan
Oh,
growing up.
that's
Like he
awesome.
was so yeah. So like I get to sit down. We had dinner with Scott and everything, and that was super cool. We The next morning we go out on the boat, and literally Scott has to teach Travis how to cast the morning of the tournament. But actually, so let me step back a little bit. Something really funny happened the morning of. So we get on the boat. It's launch. Everyone takes off. We're like, going super fast in this skeeter, or yeah, this like borrowed skeeter boat that Scott got from like someone nearby that he was friends with, because Scott's like sponsored by Skeeter. So we're like flying down the lake. Everyone's side by side, and all of a sudden our like motor just goes doo, 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 and just
Oh,
like stops, and we just stop dead in the middle of the water, and everyone just looks at each other like, what happened? And Scott's like looking down. He looks at the gas gauge. He's like, oh my gosh, we're out of gas, because he borrowed this boat, and whoever he borrowed the boat from never put gas in it. um so we're like literally dead in the water, zero, no gas. So we start laughing, and I was like, well, I guess you got to get on the trolling motor. Talking to Scott, I was like, I guess you got to get on the trolling motor. And I knew that Matt Lee had like won a classic when his
yeah,
like
with
he
his
had big
trolling
motor
motor.
problems or something like that. Yeah, and I was like, Matt Lee won a classic one time like that. So we were like making jokes, and he gets up on the front deck and drops a trolling motor, and we troll for like maybe a minute to a minute and a half, and the trolling motor dies
Oh
because
my
the guy never
God.
charged the batteries on the trolling motor. So we were literally just dead in the water. Like, and we're like all laughing so hard. We have so much like footage of us just dying laughing and stuff. And there's little like shorts of it like on like the Yokohama Instagram, and like I think on my Instagram and stuff, if you wanted to go watch them. But we're all just dying laughing because we're just dead in the water. Scott has to call one of the like tournament directors, and they bring out like a boat for us, and we swap boats, move all the tackle into the other boat, and jump over, and then take off to try to get to our fishing spot. So we're like an hour late just to the tournament just because of all of that, which was super funny. And then we get there, and Scott has to like teach Travis how to cast, and like we went the entire tournament without Travis catching a fish. And the other thing was Travis has to catch a fish in that tournament before Scott can start fishing.
Right.
So Scott was basically just sitting there trying to teach him or talk to him about what to do. And he had him throwing, I think it was like a frit side, like the little crankbait. And we went like basically the entire tournament without Travis catching a fish. And then like the last like 10 minutes, he caught like one like 12-inch smallmouth. And of course, Scott like jumps up and starts throwing a jerkbait and trying to catch something, but I don't think he ever did. But yeah, that was it. Travis has been bass fishing one time, and that's the story.
Dude, that's hilarious. Oh, that's a
So yeah,
classic.
I don't know if we're gonna go back again, for this year. I'm just waiting to hear, but I think it's coming up pretty soon, so we'll see.
That's awesome, dude. And then last question is so talking about the Nitro Circus stuff in like filming, yeah, outside of the Nitro Circus stuff, like filming with all of these very, very high grade cameras and equipment and stuff to kind of
Mhm.
put it bluntly, what computer or kind of what PC are you like entrusting for you to kind of edit all this stuff? Because believe it or not, like you have to have nice equipment to run footage from nice equipment, or else your stuff
Yeah.
will crash and burn, and you will be so sad that you lost 10 hours of editing from a computer that couldn't kind of comprehend what you were trying to do with it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I've always used Mac computers. That was just basically what I learned on in college and everything. That's just always what I've stuck with. I just know the operating system way better than a PC. So on my like I have a travel setup, which is a laptop, and then I have a home setup. My home setup is an M1 Ultra, so it's like the mid little like box setup.
Oh, yeah, that you
And
can hook
any
up
of
to the monitor.
Exactly, yeah, and I have like a dual monitor setup. But any of like the newer M series Apple computers are extremely fast and have always been great for me. So I have that as my desktop setup, and then I have like the newer M3 as a laptop. Because when I bought my 8K Red, like what you're saying is I had a 2019 laptop and I used to work fine for my 5K camera, but once I bought the 8K camera and tried to watch footage back, it was like literally like it'd play like a frame every 10 seconds or something like that. So I couldn't even watch the footage that I had filmed on the first project that I shot with it. So basically, I came home from that project, bought a new computer right away, just to which was great because I just spent a crap ton of money on a new camera and then had to buy a whole new computer to keep up with it, which was fun. So I had to buy that. So yeah, I have an M1 Ultra at home and an M3 MacBook Pro.
Yeah, I was gonna say the M1 I think came out in like 2021. That's when they first switched
Yeah.
over to that M1 chip, and unfortunately I couldn't wait and I didn't think it was gonna matter, so I got the model, the 2020 model, and I still
Mhm.
have it and it still works, but I kick myself
Yeah.
every day for not waiting and just buying the newest M1 model when it came out in 21.
Yeah, man, it's such a crazy difference between like the Intel versions and the M versions. Like the speed is just it's drastically different.
Yeah, I believe that, man. But that was the last. I thought I had one more question, but I was writing my questions down while you were talking, and I don't think. Well, I guess the last one right off the top of my head is what lenses do you run? Because
Okay.
the cameras don't make the stuff the glass does, as everybody say, whether
Yeah,
people
yes.
believe it or not. But what do you entrust to kind of put on your cameras when you're trying to film content for the day?
Yeah, for sure. So when I'm the bigger projects that I have done this year, which so if you go like on my business Instagram or my Instagram, there's one we just released, which was it was actually like a spec commercial, which is they call it a speculative commercial, which basically is like when you're pitching an idea to a company, you can make a spec commercial to show them kind of like what you want to do or like what you can do, sort of thing. So we made a spec commercial for Cannondale, not really to get any work from Cannondale, just to have fun with our friends and make something for ourselves. Um, so I rented lenses for that project, and the lenses called they're anamorphic lenses, which is what a lot of movies use. They have those very specific flares where it like pin flares across the entire frame
Yeah.
from side to side, but also like the bokeh in the background, which bokeh is like the out of focus area in the background. It has this like oval shape to it. So if there's like a light in the background, that light instead of being round like a traditional lens, it will be oval shaped in an anamorphic lens. And that's just the way that like the inner elements are shaped and stuff. So I rent a lot like that, and then I did an Olympic commercial for Black Rifle Coffee Company this year, and that was shot on anamorphics as well. I actually used the same set of lenses. They're Atlas Atlas Mercury lenses. So Atlas Lens Co. is the company. Mercury is the line of lens. They're like a newer anamorphic lens that they just came out with like a year or so ago, and they have warm anamorphic flares, which anamorphic lenses are mostly known for like blue kind of cooler flares.
Mhm.
But I really prefer the warm flare myself because it has more of like a natural tone in my opinion. Because like most lens flares in any other lens are always warm. Like if you see the sun, it's always going to be a warm flare. But if you point an anamorphic lens at the sun, it still flares blue, which is interesting, but it's a little jarring in my opinion. So I really like the warm flare because it just kind of plays into the light that's kind of naturally already in an outdoor scene. Um, so yeah, I have shot those on the two higher end projects that I have done this year. I personally own a set of lenses called Sigma Cine Primes, which are really popular and well known for like just kind of higher end commercial work just because they're really clean. They don't have a lot of what we call character, which means there's not a lot of, you know, the flares are pretty clean. There's not a lot of like grain in the image or anything like that with them. They're very clean, which works really well and really well for like higher end commercial content when you want just like your image to look really, really nice. Um, when I like what I said, texture, like you would use something where you're doing like a gritty commercial for Nike or something like that. You would want texture a lot of the time
Mhm.
in that just because it gives the image a really cool feel. But on a lot of commercial stuff, they just, your client most of the time just wants something to look clean, unless they're going for, like I said, like that black rifle thing. We wanted a very specific look, so we shot it on Anamorphics. So it has a very specific flare and has very specific grain in the image and stuff like that.
That is intriguing. I thought that everybody just puts a texture overlay over some things, but that is news to me
They
that
do.
there
Yeah, so
is
so you
grainy
can
lenses.
yeah, so like you can add grain in post and stuff like that. But it's not even necessarily grain. Like it's not like film. Like when I'm saying grain, I mean more texture than
Oh,
grain. And I
okay,
know that's
okay.
hard to understand, but like the grain where you're seeing like the little dots moving and
Yeah,
stuff
like an
like
eight
that,
millimeter
that's
grain.
yeah, like that's film grain. So that's typically what actually the sensor is doing, not the lens.
Okay.
But like if you look at different lenses on a camera, one lens, like I said, will be very clean. Another lens, like the flares will be kind of dirty and kind of gritty, and it's just
Mm,
kind of gives a different look. And it just depends on the project. It's not one is never right and one's never
mhm.
wrong. It just depends on the project you're working on.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Have you ever thought about like reaching out to Bass or like MLF or anything to do freelance work for them? One of my buddies, Brian, lives up here. He is actually a Bass camera guy, and I actually just looked and you followed him on
Mhm.
your page. He's a Bass guy, and I thought that that was super cool. And so I was just wondering if you'd ever thought about reaching out, or if you'd ever been reached out to be a camera boat or anything like that, and that like in the fishing realm of things.
Yeah, I've always thought about it, but I also am afraid that it would almost take the fun out of fishing for
Yeah.
me.
Yep.
Um, I had a blast at the classic, right? Like it was my two worlds collided for the first time ever, and it was the coolest. I met Matty Wong and all those dudes, and it was just cool to get to talk to all those guys and meet everyone. Um, but it was, I don't know. I feel like I think it would be really fun for the first 6 months to a year, and then after that, I would be like, oh man, I kind of ruined it. Like I said, fishing is just kind of the thing that I do to get away, and I've also always thought about doing like a fishing YouTube channel because obviously I'm very well versed in that kind of stuff. I could very easily create a higher end fishing YouTube channel, but then it becomes work to me, like I basically do it to
Yeah.
get away from work. So I'm not really sure. Like I have talked about it with other people, and I know quite a few filmers that do work for Bass and work for other just like as camera people for Scott Martin's camera guy and those guys um, that do it not even for Bass, just for fishermen or
Hmm.
whatever. Like and they all love it, but a lot of those guys, it seems like they don't get to fish as much as I want to be, like, and I'm afraid that if I did it, I would lose the fun that I get currently out of bass fishing.
Yeah. Yeah, I know companies who look for people outside of the fishing realm
Hmm.
to hire because they won't be what's the right word? Maybe blindsided by what they're doing. Oh, this is groundbreaking industry work. I'm gonna go home and tell my friends about it, or whatever it may
Right.
be, or kind of like maybe think about taking the idea for themselves or whatever else. Like these, I know people that are looking for people who are good behind the camera, and that's it. They don't want to have
Yes.
any
Yeah.
previous exposure to the events or to the hobbies because just because like people are gonna I feel like if you don't know what's going on, you're gonna, like you said earlier, you're gonna be filming everything. You're gonna be having ideas on what to cover, what to film, and also like if you watched all the Working Class Zero videos, and that kind of gives
Hmm.
you a bias to maybe cover stuff like Mike and his camera guy would, or
Yeah.
whatever
Like
else
a
it
certain
would be.
style.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it kind of maybe pulls away from the uniqueness of the content or from whatever you're creating in the fishing scene if you kind of have a an aspect of what's already going on.
Yeah, for sure. Like it's a very specific, like those guys who do film for bass, they have a very specific skill set. Like knowing when a fish is going to hit a topwater lure and stuff like
Yeah.
that. You have to know fishing to a certain extent to be able to do that, you know? And I think the guys who do that the best probably are fishermen and fish regularly. Because otherwise you just wouldn't know, you know, unless you had been doing it for 10 years and you just started to figure it out, right? But like there's definitely like, as a fisherman, you know when a lure is getting close to structure, what's going to happen, you know. But you wouldn't know that if you weren't a fisherman and you didn't know fishing that well.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And perfect. It's like we told you guys what we were going to segue into. This segues perfectly into the fishing side of or the swim bait side of Cody's story. So so we kind of know your timeline around like starting your own company and working with Travis and being out in
Mhm.
California and stuff. So what was your first experience into the world of swim baits? Because if I had to take a guess here, you were just a crazy far-fetched guess. You were at some park in California and you watched some guy fishing a Huddleston or something crazy, and that's what started it for you. But I don't know if that's the case, so I obviously want to hear what you have to say.
Dude, you know, I freaking wish. Like, I had zero idea that swim bait fishing was even a thing when I was living in California. Like, somehow it was just so far off my radar as a smallmouth fisherman that, like, I didn't even know that it was a thing or that big baits existed, really. Like, I knew like 6-inch swim baits existed, but I didn't know like big Huddlestons were a thing. I didn't know anything about big glide baits. It was just so far off my radar. And when I was living in California, I was working so much, I never even fished in California. I would fish when I came home with my dad on the weekend or whatever, when I would come home for a vacation. But I never got to fish when I was out there. I could have found the time, but I was just like so focused on work that that's all I was really doing. Cause like I was traveling 24/7 and I was just like buried in Nitro Circus work, you know? So yeah, major bummer. I definitely did not learn anything about swim bait fishing from California. I actually, you know, like I said, I moved back to to Pennsylvania in you know, when my dad had gotten sick, and bought my boat in 2020. And like, I guess it was when I moved back from Pennsylvania, or back to Pennsylvania originally, which I believe was 2015, 2016-ish. Um, I had gotten so much heavier into fishing than I ever was. Like, I was always super into it and like loved it, but like I am obsessed with it now. And that didn't quite exist for me, I don't think, back then. But you know, I was fishing constantly with my dad at the time. I bought my own boat, that was in 2020, and still fishing conventional basically all the time. And then it was probably 2 years ago now. I started to, I don't even really remember how it happened. I guess it was probably like tactical bassin or something like that. Um, you know, I started to see more and more about big baits and kind of started to pick them up. But the first thing I think I ever got, of course, I had like, you know, 6-inch mag drafts and stuff like that. But anything bigger than that I got was the Arashi Glide, I think was the first one.
Yeah.
And dude, I had no idea what I was doing for the first like year with that thing. Like, and it wasn't even like I didn't even have, it's not that wasn't the only bait I had for that long, but like I didn't know what I was doing with a big glide bait at all for the first like, you know, 8 months to a year. Like I had absolutely no idea. I had that Arashi Glide. I threw it a little bit. I had no confidence in it at all because I didn't know what I was doing. I eventually, like, the Spros started coming out and I bought some of those Spro Chad Chads. Um, Still through those and really didn't understand it at all. And then towards the end of that first year, I had one day out with the Chad Shad, and like I was not committing myself to it, right? I would like pick it up and I was throwing it on like a medium heavy rod, like, and not a swim bait rod, like a medium heavy, like regular bass rod. And I just didn't understand it. I hadn't done enough research to understand what I was doing wrong, you know? Um, but I knew something was wrong. Well, it's off. So I started to do more research, watch more tactical bassin and other like YouTube stuff, and started to put the pieces together that like, oh, you need actual rods to do this. And
Yeah.
like, oh, you need this different equipment that you just wouldn't have unless you were throwing baits like this, you know? Um, so eventually, yeah, I bought the Megabass, like Levante Leviathan was my first like real swim bait rod. Um, and I bought like a couple Chad Shads at the same time, the Spro ones. And started throwing those and still didn't really, this was like that, like towards the end of that first year. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was starting to throw it more and more. And I had also bought like a couple burritos, like the 6-inch burrito.
Oh
And
yeah.
I threw those. I caught a couple smaller fish on the burritos that year, but still was just kind of just randomly throwing it, not understanding how it should be used or like where to implement it. Really, I was just like guessing and trying, you know. Um, and then there was it was last fall, um, and I had, like I said, I had been throwing the Chad Shad quite a while, quite a bit, but not enough to really understand it. And then I had one day out where I was just like, okay, I had like watched a video and it was like about cadence and how to throw the bait and stuff like that. So I went and did that, and it was like, you know, fall, so fish were pushed up into the trees and stuff like that. So I knew that they weren't out deep and they were up positioned because I didn't know how to get a bait to a fish that's 20 feet down when the glide bait sinks so slow. You know,
Yeah.
like that just didn't comprehend for me at the time. But I was like, okay, fish have to be shallow right now. So I took the Chad Shad and I just locked it in my hand for a day. And I went out and I caught 3 fish on it that day. They were all like the 3 pound range, which was to me was like the biggest confidence boost that I needed. And it was like it has like I was able to go into this year with a completely different mindset because I finally figured out the pieces to the puzzle. Um, and like at that time I was, you know, still buying more baits. Like I think towards the end of last winter I had bought like oh shoot, what's the bait from Fish Everything? The paperweight.
The taxi
I bought
shad
like
or paperweight.
yeah, paperweight. Yeah, I had like bought a paperweight and a couple other things, and it was like starting to dive into a little bit more of the more expensive baits, you know. Um, and then like that day where I just like it kind of all clicked for me, you know, like it was just that one day where like everything finally made sense. Because like I said, I had caught a couple fish, but they were just so random that I couldn't have really like put the pieces of the puzzle together at all, you know. Um, and then like this year and then that first year was the first year that I broke my PB, which up until that point in Pennsylvania, like a 4 pound bass is pretty good. Like you don't, your average person doesn't catch anything that much over a 4 pound bass on
Mhm.
a regular basis, right? Even like especially smallmouth, you'll see a couple, maybe fives that are bringing into like tournaments, but those are super rare. Um, but I had only caught high, you know, high fours, but never broken into the 5 pound range. In that first year, it wasn't on a swim bait, but I caught I think it was like 5.4 or something like that on a like 6XD. Um, and I was like, well, you know, that was the first PB. And I was like, and I knew there was guys locally that were fishing bigger baits and starting to see results. And I was like, oh man, maybe that's what I need to focus on, you know? Um, so I set a goal this year to catch 5 fish over 5 pounds, which obviously was a lofty goal, having only caught one over five last year or up until last year. But I did it. Like this year, I caught 5 over 5. Um, so early on in the season, like over the winter, I did so much information on big baits and just trying to learn and trying to figure it out and understand and like what rod to use and what baits to use. And now I own a whole slew of you know, of uh, sorry, Leviathan rods and
Yeah, yeah.
a whole, you know, boxes of baits and stuff. And I didn't go that deep because I've been trying to like reel myself in and keep myself from going super crazy like some guys do, you know. But I own
Right.
a two deep Plano boxes full of baits and a bunch of rod setups and stuff. But they're all like very tailored to specific things. So yeah, this year I threw the burrito a bunch. I caught I think 3 over 5 on the burrito. I caught two. No, I caught one on what was that? Shoot, I don't remember. I have it on my. I actually did a post on Swim at Universe. One sec, I'll look it up and I'll break it all down for you.
Oh no, you're good, dude. Yeah, I will say you kind of like hammered him this year from what like I had seen from your posts and stuff. Like you didn't do
Yeah,
half bad. We'll just keep it at that for now until we further elaborate on it.
yeah, dude. It was definitely like it was like I said. It all clicked last year. Like it took me forever to figure it out, and then all of a sudden, like it all made sense, you know. And I was able to really kind of put it together this year. But yeah, so I got the numbers up now. So yeah, I was, you know, I had set my goal for myself to catch 5 over 5, which sounded kind of crazy, but I thought it was possible. I know friends that do catch more than that, so I knew it was possible, right? Which actually, so before I even go any further, there's a local dude here named Mike Colfer who is an absolute hammer. He catches massive fish on a constant basis. And it's someone that I thought maybe you should try to hit up to bring on the show because he's always throwing big baits and he is always on big fish. Like it's incredible. It even blows my mind. Like he's always catching them. Um, so yeah, anyway, he's a friend of mine, but he's a absolute hammer, which I think would be, I think he'd be a good fit to have
Mhm.
to do an episode with. Um, so okay, I'll break it down for you. Ready?
Yeah,
All right.
yep.
So this year I set a goal to try to catch 5 over 5. I caught in it was early in the year. I caught a four in one day. I caught a 4.8 and a 5.9 on an 8-inch mag draft. Just real slow creeping it on the bottom. And I know this is something that's kind of interesting because I've heard you say on the show a few times that like you or other guys haven't had a lot of confidence in soft baits, like bigger soft baits. Like that's the one thing that you haven't really
Yeah.
focused on that much, or you
Yeah.
haven't had that much confidence in. For me, it's always been the opposite. Like I've always like had the confidence that if I'm just creeping a big bait on the bottom, I will eventually get bit. And it kind of paid off this year. Like that's kind of what I started to focus on early on this year. Because again, I still only had like a couple days where I caught them on the glide. I hadn't really had a enough experience to like really have a whole lot of confidence in it, but I did have confidence in the bigger in the softer baits. So yeah, on that earlier in the spring, I caught a 4.8 and a 5.9 on one day. Like a week later, I caught and that was on the 8-inch mag draft. Like a week later, I caught a 5.24 on the mag draft. Um, and these are some that are not fives because this is just off of my swimbait universe post that I
Right,
posted the
yeah.
other day with my newer PB. Then I caught a 4.2 on like a TSG7, which was a smallmouth. And then I caught a 5.11 and a 5.6 on the 6-inch burrito, 2 different days, but different trips. I caught a 4.0 on the Metro, which is one of the most fun smallmouth baits of all time. Like that thing is so wild. It's like you can chop. Like I had one day where I caught 15 fish on the Metro. I caught like 50 fish that day, but caught 15 on the Metro, and I was just chopping it as fast as I possibly could. And smallmouth are obviously insane, and they were just like sharking it. It was
Hmm.
so. It was one of the coolest
So much
bites.
fun, dude.
Um, yeah, for sure. And then I caught a 4.8 or a 4.5 just this fall on a bellows gill, and I know bellows gill is not necessarily like a big swim bait, but it's still, I guess, sort of in the category. Um, and then I caught this fall, which I just actually like a week and a half ago, I caught a 7.2 on the OG Legend, which thanks to you, appreciate you bringing it back.
Dude, that was such a sweet went on. I my phone like buzzed and I was at work so I didn't check it, and I went on break and I was going through Instagram and I had seen you message me like, "Oh, I wonder what Cody sent me." So go on there and I'm like, "Dude, that is a badass." Like I think you was it the day before you texted me or something about it and it was like, "I'm
Yeah,
going out with this tomorrow morning."
dude, it came in the mail the day before, and I was like, and I sent you a message, and I think just took a picture of it and sent it to you, and I was like, hey, I'm taking this out tomorrow. Just said thank you, for like bringing it back because it's obviously like a fairly legendary bait at this point. Um, and yeah, I went out. But it's funny. It was kind of a funny story. Like I, uh, I went out with one of my friends, Josh, who is not into fishing at all. He's been out on a boat with me one other time, but he doesn't really know how to fish at all. He can cast, but doesn't really know how to work a lure or anything like that.
Yeah.
So like he didn't. It was so funny because like so I have live scope on my boat, and I could I saw we were like trolling on the trolling motor, and I could see a brush pile in front of us, and I could see there was a couple fish in it, and they looked bigger than average. Um, so I cast it out, and I'm just like slow chopping that legend over top of the brush pile, and just as it crosses over to the front side, like four of them like shoot up on it, and or the first like three shot up, and then one bigger one came out from behind, and the other ones I thought were like good size. They were probably like 3 4s, but then the last one that came up was just like obviously bigger than the other ones. And I was like, oh shoot. And it was so strange. Like as the bigger fish got closer, all of the other fish scattered. Like they just disappeared.
Yeah, like
And then
freaked
that fish
out.
just yeah, like that fish just kept following for a split second longer. And I thought it was gonna turn away. And then last second it just like turned and just attacked it. And as soon as it hit it, I like knew it was a big fish because I set the hook and it was just like dead weight. And I started freaking out. I was like, Josh, get the net. And he did not understand at all what was going on. Like he didn't know what I was saying. He didn't know what was happening. He obviously he like threw his rod basically. Um, and like ran down, got the net, was like tripping over things. And then like as soon as I got the fish to the edge of the boat, he was there with the net. And like he didn't even know what to do at first. He didn't like try to scoop the fish. I was like, get the net in the water, like get it in the water. And like luckily he like dipped the net and I was able to like drag the fish into the net. And like then the fish popped off the bait like as soon as it went into the net. Like it was crazy.
Wow.
Um yeah, it was wild. But and then yeah, like he turned around, I was like, I don't know where my rod is. Like, he thought he like dropped his rod in the water because he was freaking out. Like it was super funny. And like as soon as it like hit the net, I was like, dude, that is the biggest fish I've ever caught. And he's like, what? Really? Like he was like blown away. And he was like, he couldn't believe how big the fish was, but like he like obviously didn't realize in the moment when I was freaking out why I was freaking out, you know.
Right. Yeah.
Um but yeah, he was like blown away. And then like obviously we took a few photos. I sent you a couple photos with the fish and the bait. Um, and then yeah, we put it back, and that was the only fish we caught that day. Like an hour later, it started like sleeting like really hard. So I probably would. I like I said, I fish all winter long. I probably would have waited it out and like just gone and sat in the car for a minute and then got back in the boat and kept fishing. But like I said, Josh doesn't fish. He likened it to like when surfers go out in the middle of the winter and they wear like wetsuits and they come in with like ice all over their beards.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
he likened fishing in the winter too. So like I thought that was a really funny comparison. But yeah, like obviously he was not prepared. He showed up that morning in like a sweatshirt and like luckily I had like an extra jacket and an extra pair of pants and like a bunch of extra things for him to like keep him warm because he would have just been like miserable. But yeah, so he was over. So we just put the boat on the trailer, went home, and obviously I was just stoked and my day was made at that point anyway. So yeah, my goal is to try to catch another over 5 before the end of the year, but I would love to like obviously the next goal is to try to break into that 8 pound range.
So sick, dude. Absolutely crazy. I looked at it and I looked at the picture and I was just like, damn, that's it was like the perfect foreshadowing moment. You texted me the night before saying, oh yeah, I got this bait. I'm
Yeah.
really excited for it. I think I'm gonna fish it tomorrow. And then, 12, 13 hours later, oh yeah, caught a seven on it. And I was like, damn, that's good timing, man. Good timing.
Yeah, for sure. It was really funny how it all came together. Yeah, and like I said, I am still very new to swim bait fishing and learning every day, but like it has opened up an entire new world of fishing to me that I just never really knew was there before, you know. And luckily, like I've had enough fishing experience that after I started to figure it out and put the pieces together, like I now feel like I can go out on an any day and catch fish on a swim bait. Like I caught a bunch on the Tyrant 8 recently. Not anything huge, but 3 pounders and close to a 4. Um, and I just and then that same day, so I got a Tyrant. Went out with it one day, lost it that same day because I swear I broke off on an even bigger fish than that 7.
Mhm.
Um, I was creeping it over a little rock pile, watching it on live, and I saw a fish and I was creeping it towards this fish, and this fish turned around and just like attacked the bait. And anyone who knows live knows like if you start to use it enough, you can kind of tell the difference between types of fish.
Oh
It takes a
yeah,
really
yeah.
long time to understand it. It's not really that easy at all. But once you start to see how a bigger bass looks on live, it's fairly easy to tell what's a bass and what's not. Sometimes like a big carp looks like a big bass too, you know? So it's like you always have to try and just guess and just throw something at them to see. But this one I swear looked like a bass, and it turned around and it bit, and I set the hook so hard and I just broke the Tyrant right off. And I had been grinding in the rocks all day, so it's possible I just had a nick in my line and I broke it off. It's also very possible it was a muskie because I caught 2 muskie that day too. Um, so I don't know, but I like had a Tyrant for a day and broke it off the first day, so that was a really bummer situation. But uh, shout out to Kyle Regal. It's a friend of mine from Pennsylvania that I had met through Swimbait Universe. Actually, he sold me a used Tyrant, so that's what I've been throwing for now until they do another drop.
Heck yeah.
Um,
How are you fishing the Tyrant?
so I've just been fishing it like nail weights and like the beast hook on the bottom, just like slow rolling it on the bottom. Very similar to how you would fish a Huddleston.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I've had a decent amount. I guess that's one bait I didn't really mention. I've caught fish on a Huddleston um, within like the past, year and a half, to just kind of slow rolling out on the bottom. But that's another bait where I was throwing it on the wrong rod at first. I didn't really understand. Like again, it just took me a while to, I guess, to put, to understand why, or that I needed bigger rods. I didn't even know that really swim bait specific rods were a thing when I first started buying them. I never had someone show me the ropes, I just kind of had to learn it myself. So coming from, like I said, coming from smallmouth fishing, it is the complete opposite of what most people know as a smallmouth fisherman. It's light line, light rods, small baits. Like that's basically what most smallmouth fishermen grow up with. Um, so it was just so far out of the realm of things that I knew, but it's been really fun it's basically like, I feel like I almost had to relearn how to fish,
Mhm.
because it was just these like completely different baits with completely different styles. But it's awesome because now I have a whole bunch of confidence in both. So I feel I can go, like today I just went out on the river and just threw conventional and caught a couple good smallmouth just from the bank. And I did throw like the Kyle Gracely shat for a little bit, but I also got it hung up in a tree and I thought I was going to lose it. So like I have trouble fishing from the bank and like knowing that there's a chance I'm going to lose expensive lures.
Right.
So
Yeah.
like our river is just full of trees and rocks and there's so many snags that like I've lost too many glides at this point to do it. Like I've gone swimming multiple times to try to get glides back and stuff like
Oof.
that. Like I got a Metro, hung it up the first day, had to go swimming to get that. Like there's been a couple of them that I've just had to like, I go swimming with my rod in my hand and try to dig it out of whatever it's stuck on. Um,
Absolutely no
but
fun.
yeah, but obviously it's freezing right now. The water's cold, so you can't really do that. So I like try to just throw conventional unless I'm on the boat where I can try to go get it if I get hung up.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. What reels are you using? You talked about having Leviathan rods. What reels are you kind of entrusting for when you do hook up with your 8 pounder that you're gonna winch them in with?
Yeah, so I know these reels are get like kind of talked down on from some people, but I actually really like the Lose Super Duty like 300, like
Oh
their swim
yeah.
bait
Yep.
reel. I have a few of them, and I actually really like them. They're like the 6:3 gear ratio or whatever. And then I also have, so I guess I should preface that with I've always thrown, not always thrown Lose, but I've thrown Lose for a very long time because that's what my dad was throwing when I came back from California. And even before that, he was super into Lose. So that's just like every rod I own basically has a Lose reel on it just because that's what I've known. I know Shimano's obviously super nice. And I have a lot of Shimano rods. Like I have like a bunch of X Pride Bs and stuff like that. I have so many Lose reels that I like making the switch would be so expensive that I just haven't done it. So anyway, yeah, I have a couple of the Lose Super Duty 300s. I have the Lose BB1, if you've ever heard of that reel.
Oh
It's
yep.
like kind of
Yep.
like a little bit bigger frame, deeper spool. That's what I throw on like my Omega Finesse, and I have it on one of my medium heavy Omegas, which I have those ones on like a slightly faster gear ratio because I have like that's usually what I'm throwing like a smaller like a Chad Chad or something like that on, or like the TSG7 or whatever. Or so I have like slightly faster reel on those just because I'm typically chopping more with those reels.
Hmm.
And then the other ones, like my bigger soft bait rods, are like the 6'3" Lose Super Duties. But I really like them. Like I said, I know a lot of people hate on them and stuff like that, but I have so far haven't had an issue with them.
Heck yeah, dude. What was I gonna say? I had a question for you. This is like the question that I wanted to ask you since you're not per se new, but newer into it, and like you said, you have a couple 3,700 deep boxes of baits and stuff. What is
Mhm.
like your dream bait that like you have a spot on the river or a spot on a lake that like if I have this bait, I feel like I could catch a big fish. And if you already have it, or if you already have it, what's the bait that you would ask for double of, so maybe you could fish it a little more non-cautiously, I guess.
Yeah, sure. I have a couple doubles. I actually, so I've never really like dove into like the Piz or anything like that. I feel like something like that would be really cool. I have like a couple DS customs, obviously quite a few like KGB baits and stuff like that. Some of like the Lanciotti, like PG Mini and
Hmm.
stuff. But yeah, I guess maybe like a Piz or something like that. It's just something that it's something I haven't owned yet, which I think would be kind of cool to try out. Um, but I've basically tried to stop myself from buying more because I feel like I have a bait to do everything at this point. Um, and I'm trying to not overbuy, because I know it's obviously I'm addicted to it as well. It's very easy to buy way too many baits that you can't
Yeah.
fish. I try to have just the amount of baits that I can fish, and I try to keep them in a very constant rotation. Like when I go out, this whole last year, basically, I'll go out on the boat and 90% of the rods on my deck are swim bait rods. Like I'll have maybe one or two conventional rods nowadays, but pretty much everything else has moved to just swim baits. Um, so yeah, like I have one, two, three, four, five, six Leviathan rods right now. And then that one like Megabass Levante Leviathan, which I've actually retired and I'm gonna try to give away or sell to someone's for cheap. So if anyone on here wants a rod for cheap, hit me up. um, yeah, so like basically my deck is basically filled with swim baits now, whether it's soft baits or glides or like TKs or whatever. Um, um, and sorry, I don't I think I forgot your question.
No, you're good. It was just like what's a dream bait that like you
Oh yeah,
kind
yeah.
of want because you have a spot to fish it or you have an idea to fish it or you just want really bad to try out.
Yeah, yeah, I think the Piz would be something cool or something like that. Like or the what's the Black Talon. I think I've heard some really
Oh
cool things
yeah,
about
yep.
that. I've never used one of those. So just I guess the ones that I don't have. Um the Yeah, like I said, the ones that I have, I feel like I know well at this point, and it's just like I feel like I have a bait for almost every scenario, and obviously every
Right.
bait's weighted. I weight everything because that's a one of the lakes that I'm fishing pretty regularly is pretty deep, so I'm sinking glides down to fish in pretty deep water a lot of the time, which is one of the struggles I originally had because I was fishing a bait and I felt like I knew how to fish it, but I was fishing it on the surface of the water, and obviously that it's hard to call a fish up from that deep to come look at a bait. So it took me a while to understand how to sink one down and how to present it properly. But now that I've figured that out, I feel like I've kind of broken through a little bit. But so I kind of prefer like baits that almost sink a little faster than
Hmm.
probably most guys would, just because I'm fishing them a little bit deeper than a lot of guys probably are.
Right, right. Last question I have for you, man. Do you have a travel rod? So if you get a gig, in Louisville or California or somewhere crazy, do you have like a little setup that you can throw a bait or two in a travel rod and a reel and get to fish if you have some downtime on a shoot?
I don't, but I've actually really been considering getting that like Leviathan daily travel or
Yeah.
whatever it is that they have. I think that would be super cool, even for just like, going and fishing down the bank or something like that here would be really cool to have that rod. But yeah, I don't like when I'm traveling most of the time, it's like constant work. Like when we're doing those nitro tours, the only thing you're really seeing is like the inside of the tour bus or the inside of your hotel, the shuttle bus to get you to the venue, the inside of the venue, the shuttle bus to get back to your hotel or your tour bus. Like, and it's just that constantly. Every once in a while, you'll have a day off, but those day offs are usually shoot days where we just go do something fun, but we're still filming it. So it's pretty rare to have like a full day off. Well, sometimes you'll get like a morning where you can go walk around or whatever, but the amount of time at least on those tours that you get off is very minimal. But like
Right.
when I'm doing shoots for myself, where I'm traveling to do productions for Cinegrade, then I could definitely, take a little bit of time. And I've considered like, staying in Texas and trying to do like a guided trip on Texas or something like that. Which I think would be really cool, and I might try to do here this year if I end up down in Texas again or something. And like hopefully it'd be ideal to do like a swim bait guided trip down there, and then obviously there's the Mexico trip, the swim bait universe trip to
Mm,
Bacharach or whatever.
yeah.
Um, that's definitely like kind of a bucket list thing at this point, which I think would be really cool to do.
Yeah, dude, there's an unlimited amount of cool things to go do, whether it's, in the community or take a trip somewhere or bodies of water to fish or guides to go out with. It's like unfortunately it's a limitless pit that you can find yourself in very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, I've like I said, I know I have very limited experience in swim baiting as far as time goes, but I have dove head over freaking heels this year into like watching videos and like just learning the big bait side of fishing. Like, I've watched a bunch of Marshall's videos, and I've actually talked to Kyle at Throwback about maybe doing like a commercial for them or something at some point. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but we've discussed it. Yeah, so I feel like it's almost like opened up like a new community of people for me to kind of like talk to and meet and stuff, which is super cool. And obviously I have a slightly different skill set than a lot of people do. So I think I can maybe bring something cool to a company. I don't know. Like, so, I think there's potential to maybe do something really cool with like higher end fishing production of some sort,
Right.
Um, but yeah, it's just been a really cool community of people. Everyone's obviously been super cool. And it's been super fun to just try to learn a whole new side of fishing and try to, like I said, like I've caught 5 over 5 in previous years. Took me my whole life to catch 1 over 5, so it's obviously it 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 works, like if you put the time in and you try to figure it out and kind of dedicate yourself to it, there's a whole side to this that just doesn't exist in conventional fishing.
Right, dude. Yeah, 100%. It's just it's crazy how small, quote unquote, small the community is, but how much opportunity there is for someone of your like creative style. Like it's fun to look and see like, wow, there's like a lot of people that could benefit from something you do, or you could get the opportunity for something like that. It's kind of fun to just step back and look at it in a different lens. Not to be no pun intended.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I like I said, I think maybe someday like the two worlds will mesh again, and I'll get to do something cool production wise with a company and make a cool commercial for a new bait or something like that. I think it'd be really fun to do, but who knows? I'm like I said, I don't really want to make fishing a part of my career necessarily, but I think it would be cool to do like a commercial or something like that where it's more short term or whatever, and it's not like
Right.
a constant year-long grind to go film tournaments.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's something that you have to punch in the clock and go do 12 weeks out of the year, something that takes up
Right.
a couple weekends. Yeah. No, dude, it
Right.
definitely I definitely know where you're coming from about that. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, obviously you experience very similar things with the podcast and the zine and everything. Like it's a constant whirlwind.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, that's to keep it lightly. Yes. That's
Yeah.
exactly what it's
Yeah.
like, man. But where can the people follow you and find you if they're not already familiar with what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so my personal like Instagram and social media is just Cody Stauder, CodyStauder. My business account on Instagram and on Facebook is on Instagram it is This Is Cinegrade. So Thisiscinegrade. This is Cinegrade. And that's also my website is www.thisiscinegrade.com. I'm actually working on a new website and a new reel and stuff like that. So there'll be a bunch of higher new content. Like haven't put out. So in our world, our reel is basically like a highlight of your work. And I
Yep.
haven't done a new one of those in a couple years. So there will be a new one coming out with a bunch of higher end commercial stuff because every year you get bigger and better experiences and opportunities that you've had previous years.
Mhm.
Like I said, this year I did an Olympic commercial for Black Rifle. That was the first Olympic commercial I ever got to work on, so that was super cool.
That's awesome.
Um, yeah, so a bunch of bigger projects happened this year, and a lot of those will go into this reel that I'm working on, a new website and stuff like that. So that'll be out pretty soon. Um, and yeah, social media is Cody Stauder, and then this is Cinegrade.
Sweet dude. And as always, I'll put the website, the Instagram links, and the Facebook page all linked in the description, so you guys can go follow Cody on all that stuff, or go check out the page and kind of see what we were talking about. See that Cody is legit and he's not just making up some crazy stuff. You guys can go see his videos or whatnot, or you can even go on Travis's channel on YouTube and maybe scroll back and see some of those videos as well. If you follow Cody's personal page, you get to see like when he goes and films with Travis or whoever.
Yep.
Cody reposts all that stuff on his story, and that's always super, super cool to see. And you guys are picking up the car rentals or whatever you guys are doing. That I always
Yeah,
enjoy
yeah.
watching your stories, man.
Yeah, yeah. There's always constant. It's kind of like when we're on the road, it's like a constant feed of. It's mostly stories and stuff like that, and that's also like when I post fishing content. It's mostly on stories. I don't really do like lot of like hard posting. I
Yeah,
guess to my main page. So if you want to see fishing content, watch the stories. It's usually on there every week or so. And like I said, I made like a hard post for the PB that I just caught, but that's the only like fishing post I've ever really made as far
right.
as like a real post on the page. I've always thought about like starting a specific like fishing page just to
Hmm.
post that stuff because, most of the people that follow my personal account want to see cameras and stuff like
Right.
that. But
Yeah.
obviously, a fishing is another big part of my life. So anyway, yeah, it's on there. It's just a little harder to find sometimes.
Heck yeah, dude. Well, as always, Cody, I'll put all your stuff in the show notes, like I said, so people can follow you if they're not already. Was there anything that you were prepped and ready to talk about that maybe we didn't touch on yet, or touch on at all, I should say?
I don't think so. I feel like we nailed it all. I think you did a great job. I appreciate you having me on.
Dude, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you elaborating on your whole media background story. Super cool to
Yeah, for
see,
sure.
and I'm glad that I got to hear you talk about it because like Instagram and stuff, you can only, share so much or depict so much
Yep.
with a 10 picture carousel or a 20 40 second
Yeah.
Instagram reel or whatever else. You don't really get to hear somebody's backstory unless they've been on a podcast or make a huge long-winded, there we go, Instagram post that's too long, didn't read the whole thing or got bored halfway through. So,
Yep.
dude, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you sharing your whole story with us because I don't know, media is something that I obviously love. Kind of picked it up a
Mhm.
couple years ago and kind of pursuing a little bit on my own trail. But when I get to hear people talk about it and kind of how they have succeeded in it and kind of made their path for themselves, it's always reassuring, and it's always just kind of fun to hear how they navigated their path to where they are today.
Yeah, man. Well, if you ever want to talk shop or have questions about cameras or anything, I know way more about cameras than I'll ever know about fishing. So just hit me up if you ever have any questions, and I'm happy to hop on a call and talk about whatever you need.
Heck yeah, dude. Well, as always, I want to thank Cody for coming on. Like I said, all of his stuff will be linked in the description so you guys can go follow him if you're not already. Go follow him, go watch his reels, go like the business page, guys. It's all super cool stuff. Especially like if you're into cameras, it's really cool. But if you guys just like high quality content and something that is I don't know, man, like watching stuff that's very pleasing to the eye. I don't care if it's a documentary or an Instagram reel or what an Instagram story, like whatever it is, if it's like pleasing to watch, I'm kind of hooked on it no matter what the genre is or the topic. It's just kind of fun to see stuff that is captured on a camera and you could almost pass for somebody recording it, through their own eyes. It's always a very fun thing for me to kind of watch and kind of depict through what they share. But as always, I want to thank Cody for coming on. I want to thank you guys for listening. As always, make sure you guys follow Cody. Make sure you're following the podcast if you're not already. Scales and Tails underscore media on Instagram. Scales and Tails underscore media on or Scales and Tails media, I think, on YouTube or on Facebook and on YouTube. So go follow the media page on everything if you're not already. But as always, I want to thank you guys for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll talk to you guys on the next one. See you guys.